Yo, what's up guys, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're channeling our inner gardener, so make sure you got your shovels ready for the ride and let's dive straight into it. We start off by fighting a lot of drab petals, some naturalists and cultivators. The naturalists have two different abilities, with one of them being a priority kick. The choking vines is a must kick ability, as it will stun the targeted player and it will also do significant overtime damage to him. The second ability on the list is dancing forms. This will be repeatedly casted on the tank, and you can help the tank out by interrupting these if you have a spare leftover kick. The cultivators will cast Enraged Growth, which will enrage one of the nearby mobs to deal 50% increased damage, and it will also increase the attack speed by 70%. You'll want to stop this whenever possible to prevent the pools from spiraling out of control. Next up, we'll have to deal with Gnawroot. Gnawroot is a very painful mob to deal with, and to fight him efficiently you will most likely want to keep chaining him along, since he has a massive HP pool. For his abilities, we have Gnawed Roots. This will root all surrounding players and you will need to kill the roots to get out of them. If you however have an ability that will remove roots, this will also work. For example, in this clip I use Bladestorm to get out of them, because it removes movement impairing effects. For the second ability, we have Living Leaves. This ability will spawn leaf tornadoes on the player's positions, silencing them and dealing damage over time. This follows very fast after the gnawed roots, so make sure to get out of the roots in a timely fashion to not get stuck in the roots and the living leaves at the same time. Before we get to fight the boss, we encounter one more mob, the Everbloom Mender. This mob will cast Healing Waters, and it does it as advertised. It will heal an allied monster, so you want to kick this to prevent the pack from taking a very long time. Before we can actually fight the boss, however, we will have to deal with the 3 packs surrounding the boss. Once you have killed all of those, the boss will spawn and you can engage the battle. The first boss on the list is Witherbark, and this can be quite a fast fight if you play it correctly. So let's start off by diving into the abilities. First of all, the boss will periodically target a player with unchecked growth. You can easily see when you get targeted by the yellow arrow indicating that you are targeted. You want to place these vines in a convenient space between the boss and the water behind the boss. It will spawn a vine, which we will need for the next ability called Brittlebark. Whenever the boss casts Brittlebark, he will be dried out and try to rehydrate his bark. And during this time, he will take 100% increased damage. To rehydrate his bark, however, the boss will spawn various water orbs coming from the water that will slowly move towards the boss. You can either choose to kill these water orbs or prevent them from going to the boss, or you can prevent them from getting to the boss with the vines placed earlier. When the water touches one of the vines, they will instead turn into a mob that you can easily cleave down during the fight, which is a lot easier to deal with. So make sure you place the vines in a good spot so you can prolong this phase for as long as possible. Lastly, the boss will throw out blue water swirlies throughout the encounter, which you will not want to get hit by. If you do get hit, however, you will take significant damage and your healer will most definitely hate you for it. Coming up to the second boss, we encounter some new mobs that are quite significantly harder to deal with than the ones we've encountered before. First off, we meet the Melded Berserkers. These mobs will periodically jump towards a random player and start using Bounding Whirl. This is a Bladestorm ability that will deal a lot of damage if you stand inside of the circle in which they are spinning. You'll want to get out of this as fast as possible, use stuns, incaps or other abilities to stop them, as this does a lot of damage. The second mob we face is the Twisted Abomination. This mob will cast Noxious Eruption, which will do significant AoE to everyone standing in an 8-yard radius, and it will also knock them back. You can outrange this if you're fast enough to do so, and your healer will thank you very much for doing so, since the Berserkers are already making these pools hard enough as it is. Other than that, it will leave a poison on the tank, which you can't really do too much about other than healing him through it, and to be efficient, you'll most likely want to skip most of the Thrash here, since it is doing a lot of group-wide AoE damage. Next up, we face the Ancient Protectors, and let's just say melee will not have the most of enjoyable times on this boss. So let's check out what it is they actually do. The boss consists out of 3 bosses, with the tank only being able to move Dulhu. First off, we deal with the Noxious Charge. Dulhu will target the tank, indicating by a big green swirly around him. When the boss finishes this charge, It will leave a big green toxic puddle around the tank, and it will also spawn a toxic puddle on the locations of the other players. So make sure that you're standing in a convenient spot when the tank gets charged to not clog up too much room, which you will need to attack the bosses. If you stand in these puddles, you will take a massive ticking damage hit while being in them, so move out of them as fast as possible. Secondly, we'll have to keep an eye on Live Water Gola. This boss will cost Revitalize every now and then, and it will need to be interrupted. If you do not interrupt this, all bosses will be healed for 15% of their maximum HP and an additional 5% every 2 seconds for a total of 10 seconds, resulting in a total heal of 40%. If this does however go through, make sure to dispel it as soon as possible, as it will get rid of the heal over time. Moving on to Earthshaper Telu. We'll have to keep an eye out for Toxic Bloom. This ability needs to be interrupted. Failing to do so will stun all players for 4 seconds, which will most likely wipe your group. Both the ranged attacks will cost Terrestrial Fury, which will do group-wide damage for 24 seconds. We can prevent this, and it's just a heal-through mechanic, so best of luck to you healers. To fight this boss, you will want to tank Delhu as close to one of the ranged protectors in order to cleave on Delhu while trying to focus down either Telu or Gola. To make the kicks more easily manageable, you'll want to have a ranged player keep an eye out on the boss which isn't being fought at the moment to catch the interrupt. Moving up to the third boss, we'll fight some of the hardest Thrash in my opinion throughout all of the dungeons. First off, we face an infested Ice Caller with hapless assistants around him. Make sure to always interrupt Frostbolt, as this will absolutely chunk your HP bar. Other than Frostbolt, the Ice Caller will also use an ability called Cold Fusion. This ability will spawn 6 Frost Orbs around the targeted player, and these orbs will close into the position he was originally standing in. If you get hit by one of these Frosty Orbs, you will be turned into a popsicle, stunning you for 4 seconds while also taking damage, so make sure to avoid these. Next up, we face a Putrid Pyromancer, which is equally as dangerous, if not more dangerous than the Ice Caller. The Pyromancer will cost Cinderbolt Salvo, which will channel for 4 seconds. It will hit random targets every 0.25 seconds for a lot of damage. You cannot stop this ability, so once again, good luck to all the healers to keep your group alive. Next up, we will need to interrupt Pyroblast. Much like Frostbolt, this will chunk your HP bar, so you will always need to kick this. Lastly, we will have to deal with an adult Arcanomancer, which will once again be just as dangerous as the last mob that we fought. The Arcanomancer will cost Arcane Blast, which we will need to interrupt just like the Frostbolt and the Pyroblast. Failing to do so will once again chunk your HP bar, so make sure to interrupt it. Besides costing Arcane Blast, the Arcanomancer will cost Spatial Disruption. This ability will target a player which can be seen by a swirly indicating the place where it will impact. It will fire out an Arcane Orb, which will explode on the location that has been targeted. If you stand inside of this, it will pretty much instantly kill you, so make sure you move out instantly. Now that we finally dealt with all of the Thrash, we can start taking a look at the third boss, which is Archmage Sol. And Archmage Sol is a very interesting boss, because it actually copies all of the abilities from the mobs that we've just fought before, but this time with a little bit of a twist. So let's see. This boss will swap out between 3 phases, being Fire, Frost and Arcane. Each time the boss will swap phase, it will leave behind a remnant of the last fought phase, and we will also need to deal with the abilities that we've previously dealt with. So for the Fire phase, we will have to deal with Fireball and Cinderbolt Storm. Besides Cinderbolt Storm doing a lot of damage to a random player, it will now also fire swirlies onto the ground, which we will need to dodge. Whenever these swirlies hit the ground, they will also leave behind a fire patch. If you stand in these fire patches, you will take a lot of unnecessary damage, so just be sure to not stand in them. For the Frost Mage, we will have to deal with Frostbolt and Glacial Fusion. These Glacial Fusions will now target all players with orbs closing inwards. So make sure to prevent being hit by one of these, or you will be turned into Frosty the Snowman. Lastly, we will have to deal with the Arcane phase. The Arcane phase will consist out of Arcane Blast and Spatial Compression. Spatial compression will shoot out an arcane orb to a location and explode. But besides it's just doing that, it will now also draw players closer towards the orb. You can however bait this ability since it will always target the furthest target from the boss, so make sure to abuse this. The further you get into this fight, the harder it gets. Due to those images being left behind whenever you transition phases, it will cause for some very interesting and also very hard overlaps, so make sure that you are ready to deal with a lot of mechanics. Moving on, we'll face the last boss in this dungeon, being Yalnu. This boss is pretty simple to deal with compared to the last boss we've just fought, so you'll be able to catch your breath a little bit. First off, the boss will use Colossal Blow. It's a big frontal cone, you will just need to walk out of it, and that's that. The mages around the room will cast Brush Fire. This will increase the damage that the boss takes by 300%, so big shout out to our friendly neighborhood mage for hooking us up. The next ability on the list is Verdant Eruption. Verdant Eruption will spawn a Flourishing Ancient, and this will need to be killed as soon as possible. This will interrupt the mages that make the boss take 300% increased damage, so full nuke it. Besides interrupting the mages, it will also do group-wide damage, and it will also cast a frontal. Last on the list, the boss will cast Genesis. This ability will channel for 12 seconds, and in this time you will need to walk over as many flowers that are spawned across the room as possible to destroy them. If the flowers are left at the end of the cast, these flowers will turn into Feral Lashers. You will not want to deal with the Feral Lashers as they start doing random damage to random targets, and it will just make the encounter a lot harder to deal with. So long story short, just do mechanics. And that is pretty much everything there is to cover about Everbloom. All in all, I think this is probably the hardest dungeon currently in the map pool for Season 3, and it will be fun to see how people will deal with all of these hard-hitting mobs and how they will adapt to the bosses. Thank you for watching though, make sure to give a thumbs up if you liked the video and consider subscribing. If you have any questions, as always feel free to leave a comment down below or ask them while I'm streaming live on twitch.tv/JuventusTV. And I'll hope to catch you in the next one.